Hey there, Kris Feroleto. I never know how to pronounce the name
You
correctly.
said it perfectly. How are you? It's so lovely to see you. It's been a moment.
Yeah,
Um,
it's been a while. And that's a shame, like we've been seeing each other quite a lot over the last year
we
after
certainly
you
have.
initially reached out to me about a year ago.
Yes. And that's a story. Would you like to hear the story?
Yeah, I think I would love to hear the story, and also
I,
the viewers would love to hear the story.
I think mhm,
Can you start though with a fun fact about you that people won't read about you on the internet?
absolutely. A couple fun facts. I, in my 50s, I'm giving my age away, went back to school to learn to become a yoga instructor.
Mhm.
And in my 60s, I went to school to get my boating license. So I would say that I'm a lifelong learner. I just love to learn new things and experience new things to
Well,
keep life interesting.
let's see what you're going to be up to in your 70s and 80s and 90s.
I still have many years in the 60s, so let's see
There's
what I
still a
do
lot to do.
before exactly
Yeah,
before I
yeah,
get
yeah,
through that.
yeah.
So those are some fun facts. And the other fun fact is my dream is I would love to take a world cruise.
Mm, awesome. Good idea.
Yes.
I would love to take a train ride from Berlin to Singapore.
Oh, that
That's
would
my
be
big
very,
dream.
yes, yes. Travel.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some interesting things about me.
I guess the world cruising and the travel connects us, Chris. Um,
Yes,
Maybe you want to tell that story about how you actually found us.
I will because it's an interesting story. I'm going to back up and say that I'm a lifelong learner. I have a degree in human growth and development, which led me into getting my master's in special education and then school counseling. And then on top of that, also school administration.
Yeah.
So for your viewers to know, I love to learn and I love new experiences. And in this situation, life complicated life. My partner was offered a job in Geneva,
Mhm.
and that was 3 years ago. And so it was she, myself, and the dog. We packed up for a 6 month contract and moved here. And we were bright-eyed and so excited about the adventure, which turned out to be a big letdown. And the letdown was more because of poor planning
Mhm.
and support. We didn't know as a first-time expat what we should have known. So we walked into Geneva blindly, not realizing trying to find a rental is next to impossible when you only have a 6 month contract. So imagine I was in a hotel room with a 65-pound dog while my wife went every day to work. And
Is your dog
yeah,
with you? Is your dog with you? Can you show us your dog, Josie?
unfortunately, the dog's downstairs, but the
Uh,
cutest, her name is Josie, and she is a golden doodle
yeah.
and is a big old teddy bear. But so here we are, we arrived to Geneva. My wife is at a new job. She is working crazy hours, and I am stuck in a room because we did not have accommodations. And this was in November. And on top of that, between November and February, we had to change hotels 4 times.
This was after the pandemic, right? It was not in
Right
the
after the
year with the,
pandemic.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then also in the worst time of the year in Geneva and Zurich, when it's
Yes,
cold, dark, and
yes.
freezing. And
So
you came from the US, right?
I came from the
Yeah.
US,
Yeah.
from the New York area.
Hmm.
And so our dream was a little skewed because the hotel room was not big at all.
Hmm.
And Josie and I would spend our days in the hotel room or bundled up walking together down by the lake because there's really not much you can do when you have a dog by your side full time.
Hmm.
Um, so to make a long story short, after 3 months of the 6 month contract, I said, you know what? This is not sustainable. We, the dog and I need to go back.
Right.
You finish the 3 months, um, and we'll commute and try to make the next 3 months work. And so that's what we did. And for somebody who I believe is works very hard to make things happen, I felt very defeated. I was saddened by the fact that it was such a terrible experience, and I left feeling like, damn, I should have been able to make this work. Look at all that I've accomplished, and I couldn't do this.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
And even now, even though I heard your story already, it still
mhm.
makes me sad, that you had such a bad experience initially.
It, so I had that terrible experience. Fast forward, my wife gets a promotion,
Mm.
and the promotion then causes us to have to come back to Geneva full time. And so I'm like, ooh, second time around, how am I going to do this? And
Mm.
so I did a deep dive and I was researching everything, trying to find out, okay, this didn't work the first time. How am I going to make it work the second time? And I began to join some Facebook expat groups, and one of them was, expats in Geneva. And I'm scrolling and reading about all of the trials and tribulations from many people. And randomly, I came across a post that said, you need to contact this woman, who was you, Angie, and see what she can offer. Now, the post was a leader who was trying to assimilate in the job arena.
Mm.
So I remember that evening, it was late, and I wrote you a note and it said, I don't even know if you can help me. I am a spouse of a global leader trying to make the transition the second time in which I wanted to make it successful. And you were so kind because you wrote back immediately. And I believe it was the next day that we connected and had a conversation.
Yeah. And, I probably told you that, but then the first time you didn't turn on the camera.
Of the
And the whole message and everything, it just sounded to me too good to be true. And then after that conversation, I thought, that's strange. So you just didn't turn on the camera, there was some issue. And then the next time you said, I'm gonna bring my wife on the call with me. And
Mhm.
then you also asked if you could twint me some money. And then I was getting really suspicious.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh
well,
my
because
God, this is probably someone from some weird country trying to rob me of my money. And then I was so relieved when I saw the both of you on camera and you were real people and we had a good laugh about it.
and the funny thing is I always go from the perspective of we didn't know what we didn't know. So
Yeah,
some of the things that seem strange were strange because we were clueless.
yeah,
We didn't have uh, what you are to me and have been for the last year, a coach
yeah.
to say, oh no, this is how you do it. Oh, consider doing it this way. we were blind. We were very, very blind in the whole process. So, I believe that my prayers were answered through that email, because quite honestly, if we couldn't figure out how to overcome some of the things that happened the first time around,
Yeah.
we were quite nervous of what it would look like the second time.
Yeah. And obviously, you said you then, you started to tackle some of the logistical challenges. And we went through some of the, preparations together, which, I think is an important part of expat coaching. And you were so organized. You had your house ready before you even landed. Yeah. Like that was amazing for me. So
Well, I think part of it was
can you
it
tell
was
a bit more about how you actually organized yourself, and then also maybe what the harder part was of the
Of
transition?
course, of
Yeah,
course. I will have to say, looking back at what did not work was a motivating factor to look at the organizational things we needed to do so we didn't step into the same issues.
yeah,
So as far as organizing was concerned, as soon as my wife knew she was going to take the job, remember, many of her colleagues knew the story and were like, we cannot let the same thing happen to both of you again. So
right.
she had her tribe in Geneva. They were sending rental properties. They were helping her figure out what area to live in. Some of the basic things that they did for us gave us more room to think about the other issues.
Yeah,
And so it was critical for me that we found a home before we got there, because on top of it, we were bringing the dog, and
Josie.
yes, Josie, when we were living in the hotels, it was blocks before you could get to green space. So that was one
Yeah,
of my major requirements. We need a space where there's green space readily available. So that not only my spouse and I had a nice transition, but the dog did too. So that all worked out. And then by this time, you and I were chatting quite a bit, and you were so helpful because you were very structured in, okay, Kris, these are things to consider before you come to Geneva. How are we going to close your house? And what are the things? So you would send me grids of information like, oh, what about the taxes? What about for this past year was, am I going to get my voting ballot?
mm,
All of all things that it was like, okay, before we go, let's take care of it. And it was taken care of because we had a to-do list from you. The other thing I did, I wanted to create a home that was comfortable for all of us.
mhm,
So I literally went room to room and made a list of things that we use quite frequently, and that, silly things like the special blanket we use to sit and watch TV, or the beautiful vase that my sister-in-law gave me. So I had a notebook and I would say living room, and I'd write down what we needed to take from the living room. We'd go through the kitchen. My wife happens to be the cook, so I would make my list, and then she would come behind me and go, "Oh, but we also need this, we need that, we need that." And so we created a home literally going room by room, so that by the time the movers came, there was no question. We
mm,
we knew exactly what needed to come to make Geneva feel like home.
yeah.
That's the
Hold on,
logistical.
hold on for a second, Kris. I just need to explain something to my viewers.
Okay.
Because, if I think about the global mobility folks that are watching, and even
Mhm.
expats, what
Mhm.
they're probably used to is, that people, they get a house, they get household goods removal paid in one
Right.
month. So what usually happens is, the movers come, they pack everything in the house. Then, you get your full container load, and the container then is taken to the other
Right.
location, the other country. Takes
Right.
about 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the supply chain
Yes.
reality that we're facing. Um,
Yes.
and that is sort of the normal thing. And then most expats, they live in temporary accommodation in the first 3 months, and then they move into their permanent location in months four approximately, when they're in the middle of cultural adjustment, which is great because, then you're really in the valley of tears, and you also have to move and face all the furniture that has been scratched along, on the journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Um,
yeah, so that is actually happening. But your case was different because you kept your home, right?
And so that's the next thing that I was going to say. We felt that it was critical that our forever home, because before this assignment, we both were retired. So
Yeah.
we had created our forever home, that we wanted that home to still stay intact so that when we go home, we have a home to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a balancing act because, we had to be quite choosy as to what we could take without leaving a vast gap in our forever home. And we were quite fortunate that we found a furniture store in Connecticut that allowed us to buy a few floor samples. They were quite kind. They knew we were under a moving crunch, and they were like, you know what? If you try to order that, it's not going to make the move. Just take this. We'll order something new to put in the space. So from that perspective, it worked really, really well. That was the logistical part, but the part that I also think was critical during that period, and you were quite good in reminding me,
Mm-hmm.
the organizer, make the list, do everything. You need to slow down, and you also need to find time, meaningful time, to spend with your family and friends
Yeah.
before you pack up and go, because it's going to come upon you quite quickly, and you want to still have those special moments,
Mm.
and you want to be able to create with those special people modes of communications and figuring out what the next step is going to look like. And so having that in my ear from you was critical for both of us, because we're at a stage in life where we have mothers who are elderly, we
Yeah.
have siblings that we care and adore, that we want to make sure that we are still connected with them, and the nieces and nephews, and it goes on and on. So I think from the logistical side, um, we figured it out. And it was critical then to spend time saying, okay, we only have a certain amount of time. How are we going to create moments and memories to carry with us into this new adventure?
Yeah.
So that was very, very important.
Yeah, yeah. Because we do not only work, obviously, on the logistical aspects of, supporting you, but also on the psychological
Yes.
aspects, which are probably a lot harder to handle if
Hmm.
look at it now in
Hmm.
hindsight. And I would love you to also talk a bit about that. I just wanted to also add another question to the mix because it's become
Sure, sure.
really important to me, Kris. I have just finished a last lecture yesterday in our
Okay.
master course for global mobility managers and international recruiters in
Hmm.
Erasmus University. And one of my lectures is on enhancing the expat experience.
Right.
So, it's maybe a bit technical, but it's also about, what are the elements that we can include in our policies, procedures, and processes so that our assignees feel more included and welcome, especially, from various backgrounds that because we face a lot more female assignees, for example. That was not happening 50 years ago, that we had so many women going on assignment, and women might have other needs than men. Yeah. Now, you were talking a bit about the adjustment, the challenges. You are in retirement, you're not looking for a job right now. So that's also a different spousal situation than for many younger couples, obviously. But tell us a bit more about all your, learnings and what you think we need to include in the education of the HR professionals, dealing with expatriation.
It's so funny that you asked that question because the response was immediate in my head. Couldn't
Yeah.
wait to tell you. I think the number one thing that I would talk to HR about is don't assume that your new expats are okay. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest issues
Yeah.
was when our story was told, people were a little bit dumbfounded, like, well, we didn't know. And again, when you're an expat, we didn't know what is normal. So
Yeah.
we're walking around thinking, oh my God, this is what it feels like to move to another country. Where's the support?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, if you're not speaking up, HR will just take the assumption that, oh, I guess they're fine, and they've moved on to their next issue.
Right. If you're not
So
complaining, we think you're okay.
exactly, if you're not the squeaky wheel, then things must be okay. So I think if you begin there, knowing that there are no assumptions and there are certain stages that any expat goes through, it would help normalize some of the emotions, the feelings, the angst, the anger about, oh, okay, this is normal. Because it was often without you first time around to think, oh my God, am I, you know, I'm tired all the time. I'm having a hard time focusing. And to learn that, yes, Kris, you're going to go through that. You're learning a new language. Anything you try to do now takes double the amount of energy. You have to figure out the buses, the schedules. You have to figure out the new currency. I mean, everything that was automatic from whatever country you came to is like baby steps learning
Yeah.
in the new
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So,
And let me not even get started on the recycling.
okay, let's not get started on that either, because that has been a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, it's interesting because every country has its own norms and ways of doing things. And you don't know, again, this seems to be the common phrase in this interview. You don't know what you don't know.
Yes,
And,
exactly. Yeah.
and oftentimes you learn too late when you've done, there's been a faux pas or you've made a mistake or you have to recorrect something
Mm.
because you didn't know. And that again goes back to HR. It's not a one and done like, oh, welcome, glad you're here. You settling in okay? Okay. There should be check-ins regularly
Mm.
um, to help expats adjust. Um, because you don't run across everything in the first 3 weeks when you arrive in a different country. Many things accumulate over time that you just need somebody to be able to ask a question.
Mm.
Um, and, for my partner, her job is so intense, trying to find the time to ask the question is sometimes impossible. Um, and for me, many times it was trial and error.
Mm.
As simple, we're going back to the dog. How do you get a dog tag, for a dog in a foreign country? That so the dog is considered legal in the country now in which you live.
Yeah, and we would probably have a service and we would probably know someone who can help you with this, even if I don't really know the answer on every
Right,
question. Not every question, obviously, but I would know
right.
somebody who does. So, we could also connect you with professionals in the various spaces and
And
specializations on various topics. Yeah.
and maybe you know the answer to this. The other thing that I would recommend for HR is to have like a question and answer little handbook of
Mm.
most commonly asked questions for new expats,
Mm.
so that they're not scrambling to say, oh my God, who can I reach out to? Or, what do I do with this? Um, because you talk about the assimilation. I remember, and it's funny being a woman, my roots were a mess. And I'm like, how do I go about finding a salon? And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, roll up your sleeves and start Googling and seeing which salons have the best um, ratings and who is the stylist you might want to try, and then going and checking out their work. So it's everything that
Yes.
you're adjusting to. So um, I would say that's another thing. I'm trying to think of, I feel like HR cannot assume. HR needs to be far more proactive.
Mm.
HR also needs to educate their staff about expat coaches.
Hmm.
Angie, I didn't even know what an expat coach was. Okay. I didn't even know there was a profession out there. And I feel fortunate that I stumbled upon it. But
Mm.
imagine all of the people who have not
Yeah.
and who are trying to navigate this without the support.
Yeah.
And I don't mind telling the audience that you and I worked for a year together on this, and it was a roller coaster ride. But the coolest part about it all is I could say, okay, Ange, talk to me. What stage am I in right now? And every time I asked the question, it was classic because you would go, okay, Kris, here's where you are right now, and what you're feeling is normal. And to be able to normalize feelings makes things a lot easier because it's not weighing on you like, am I don't have anybody to gouge how I'm feeling, validate, or sometimes, when I was off as my coach, you would be like, Kris, I got to tell you something that's going to be hard, but you need to listen. And I did. But then I knew it was like, okay, you're feeling sorry for yourself, get over it. Or no, that's legit. So that was nice to have somebody normalize. And for your viewers, I'm a counselor and trained, and I did that for many years, but I couldn't support myself because
Absolutely.
I was in the thick of it, and
Mm.
it was hard for me to see. And it was wonderful when you kind of threw some things back on me and said, Kris, if you were a counselor, what would you tell that person? And then I'd be like, oh my God, you're right. But in the emotion part of it, you can't separate it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a few things that you just said. One of the things is if you don't know what you're looking for, like if you don't know that you're looking for an expat coach or an expat therapist or somebody with that background, you don't know what
Right.
to Google for. Um,
Exactly.
and that
Exactly.
makes it really hard if you, especially if you feel very much alone and you don't know who to share your experience with.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
probably even increases your feeling of loneliness and
Right.
isolation. Um,
Absolutely.
and then I guess also the Swiss society is not very inclusive in itself. It is a bit of
Hmm.
a coconut culture. It's hard to break into the circle of trust, as I usually say, and it takes a long time until people open up to you and sort of take you in. Even in the more international groups, you would probably also could share that experience that it's sometimes a bit hard to break into those circles. And honestly, I don't hear that only from Switzerland. I hear that from other expat hubs, other locations as well. Kris, if
And
you if you would summarize what you think is what are your key takeaways from doing this, from this experience, this time, how would you summarize it?
uh, quite simply, the number one thing that I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help. That
Right.
trying to navigate this journey by yourself and with your partner is quite overwhelming. And that now that I know that there are professionals who do this as a living, this made the difference between our first time coming and the second time coming. It's night and day.
Mm,
I liken it to the first time I was here in Geneva, I was a ball of anxiety,
mm,
um, a huge ball of anxiety. And this time around, I feel empowered. I'm able to see, oh, this is a cool experience. And I look back on the other experience and I'm kind to myself and say, I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm also proud of you for coming back and seeing the other side of what this could be. And being an expat is life-changing. Being an expat um, allows you to grow personally.
mm,
It allows you to grow within your own relationship, and it provides opportunities that you know, we certainly wouldn't have had being in the States. One of the things we started that I want to take a world cruise. Being here in Europe, you can hop on the plane and go to so many different countries.
yeah,
And this time around, we've been able to do that.
yeah.
And we've gathered many, many memories as a result of that. The other thing is there's nothing more heartwarming than developing friendships from people from all around the world who become part of your tribe.
Mm.
And you know that if something happens, they're only a phone call away. So first time around, I felt quite lonely and isolated, and this time around, not so much because we have developed a tribe and a community. Um, and you're you've made it when you travel and you say, "Oh, I can't wait to come home." And in your mind, home is Geneva.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I giggle to myself and I'm like, wow, you've come quite far, because that's the way you're thinking.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad to see that, it worked out this time for you.
Yes,
And you
yes.
have a lot of interesting things coming up. Do you want to tell our audience what you have planned over the holidays?
Over the holidays, we are going on a cruise. It's not a world
Uh-huh.
cruise.
Uh-huh.
We will be going to South Africa,
Mhm.
and cruising around South Africa. And I'm like a little kid because part of the cruise itinerary is to go on a safari.
Oh,
And
that's going to be amazing. Wow.
I'm looking at it as a once in a lifetime opportunity and something that I've always looked from afar like, oh, wouldn't that be cool?
Mhm.
Now I'm doing it. So yes,
Kris, it's
looking
been
forward
great
to that.
talking to you today, and all the best. Enjoy.
Thank you,
Have a
Ange.
great time on your safari.
Thank you, and happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays. Bye bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.